Last night you were a citizen of the world's greatest power. This morning you're nothing. Your currency has gone to scrap. Your passport is worthless while you're screaming for an explanation. The rest of the world is already dividing up your remains. To understand how you get here, you have to go back 2,356 years. It is 500 BCE. You are a subject of the Achaemenid Empire. Forget countries. This is a continent-sized monopoly. It stretches from the Balkan Mountains to the Indus River and holds 44% of the human race in one hand. 1 in every 2 people on Earth obeys the same throne. You trust the gold, Derek. You trust the immortals. You think this system is a law of nature. It isn't. It's a bubble. 334 BCE. The Black Swan arrives. Alexander of Macedon crosses the Hellespont with 47,000 men. Against an imperial population of 50 million, he is a rounding error. The Persian high command doesn't panic. They treat him like a border dispute. A nuisance. They are wrong. 331 BCE Gaugamela. Darius III mobilizes the full weight of the imperial machinery with 100,000 troops, scythe chariots, and war elephants. On paper, the Macedonian army should be a footnote. But in practice, the Persian military's sheer size was no match for superior organization and equipment. Then the unthinkable happens. Darius III sees the line break. He turns his chariot and abandons the field. In a system built on the King of Kings, the leader's exit is a complete breakdown. The collapse goes parabolic. Confidence, the only thing backing the imperial gold, disappears overnight. The satraps start negotiating. The immortals die in the dirt. The royal treasuries at Susa and Persepolis are cracked open and looted. The influx of captured gold detonates in the Mediterranean like an economic bomb, triggering massive inflation and a global reset. By 330 BCE, the Achaemenid Empire was a dead asset, dismantled in 48 months. You are standing in the ruins of a $1 trillion monopoly that went bankrupt at the peak of its power. The next superpower doesn't get invaded. It destroys itself with unlimited money. You are in the early 1500s. Spain controls a global empire. It encompasses most of Central and South America, parts of North America, the Philippines, and territories in Europe and Africa. You say the sun never sets on your empire. Ships arrive loaded with silver from the Americas, and 16,000 tons of silver enter Spain between 1500 and 1650. You think this guarantees permanent dominance. It doesn't. During the 1500s, prices in Spain rose by nearly 400%. Your silver loses value inside your own economy. Everything costs more, without production increasing in response. Your goods become too expensive for global trade. Foreign products undercut your markets easily. You stop producing because buying becomes cheaper than making. Your industries begin shutting down across the country. Other nations take your silver and build strong economies. England and the Netherlands invest in trade, banking, and manufacturing. You keep extracting silver and spending it immediately. At the same time, you fight wars across Europe continuously. You try to control multiple regions through military force. The costs keep rising and the returns keep falling. You borrow heavily from foreign bankers to sustain spending. Then you repeatedly fail to repay those loans. You declare bankruptcy in 1557, then again in 1560. You repeat it in 1575, 1596, 1607, 1627, 1647, and 1680. 8 national bankruptcies in just over 1 century. You still believe the system is working. You refuse to build modern financial institutions and keep economic control concentrated under the crown. Innovation slows because private enterprise lacks room to grow. Large land holdings remain under the church and the nobility. They don't use that land productively. In 1492, you expelled Jewish communities from Spain. In the early 1600s, you expelled the Moriscos as well. You remove skilled workers, merchants, and farmers from your system. Your economy weakens further while your empire still looks strong. You fight the Dutch for 80 years and lose control. You send the Armada against England in 1588 and lose it. You fight France, England, Protestant states, and the Ottomans. You fight almost everyone at the same time. You don't win that kind of war. By the late 1600s, the empire couldn't sustain itself, the economy is damaged, and the military is stretched thin. Your global dominance disappears despite all that silver. By 1700, you are no longer a leading power. You just watched a superpower collapse while holding massive wealth. It did not run out of money, it made money useless, and Spain was not the only nation to lose power this way. What happens when the next empire wins the biggest wars in history and still loses everything? Can you guess which nation we're talking about? Drop your guesses in the comments. You are in the early 1900s. Britain controls the largest empire in history. At its peak in the 1920s, it ruled about a quarter of the world's land. Around 450 million people live under your control. Your navy dominates global seas without serious challenge. Your banks finance trade across continents. The pound sterling runs global finance as the reserve currency. You believe this position can't be challenged. In 1914, things began to change. World War I breaks out across Europe, and you commit massive resources to fight a prolonged war, which cost you around £260 billion in today's value. You borrow heavily from the United States to sustain the effort. Before the war, other nations owed you money. After the war, you owe the United States instead. Nearly 1 million British soldiers died in the conflict. Millions more returned wounded or unable to work. An entire generation disappears from your workforce. You win the war, but the system weakens underneath. In the 1920s, your empire becomes even larger on paper. You take control of former German and Ottoman territories. You look stronger than ever to the outside world. Then, in 1939, the second shock began. World War II forces you into another huge conflict. This war cost around £767 billion in today's terms. You borrow even more through American support programs like the Lend-Lease. The financial pressure becomes permanent and you continue to pay off debts until 2006. The war ended in 1945, but the payments continued for 61 years. The cost is not only financial. In 1942, Singapore fell to Japan. This loss shatters your image of military invincibility in Asia. Your empire no longer looks unbreakable to the world. Then the core begins to splinter. India demands independence after the war ends. You don't have the money or manpower to resist. In 1947, India and Pakistan became independent states. Nearly 400 million people leave your empire at once. After India, other regions follow quickly. Burma, Ceylon, Palestine, Ghana, all leave. Nigeria, Kenya, Malaysia, and Singapore follow. Stopping the exits doesn't make sense. Maintaining the empire becomes too expensive to justify. Military bases, administration, and defense costs continue to rise. The returns no longer cover the expenses. At the same time, nationalist movements grow stronger everywhere. People no longer accept foreign rule after global wars. Suppressing them would require force you can't afford. All the while, the United States emerges stronger after World War II. It becomes richer, more productive, and more influential globally. The dollar replaces the pound as the world's reserve currency. American companies dominate global trade and industry. You are no longer leading the system. By the 1960s, you went from ruling the world to being just another European country. You spend 2 global wars proving you can win any fight, all to realize you can't even afford to hold what you won. And the next empire faces that problem at a much higher cost. You're a proud French citizen in the early 1900s. Your country controls a big colonial empire. It holds territories across North Africa, West Africa, Central Africa, and Indochina. So far, so good. In 1914, World War I hit your territory directly. The war is fought largely on French soil. Over 1.3 million French soldiers died in the conflict. Entire regions turn into destroyed land with no productive use. You survive, but the damage stays inside the system. Then, 1940 arrives with a second shock. Germany invades France and defeats it in 6 weeks. Your country is occupied and has lost control of its own territory. Your global reputation is gone almost instantly. You regain control after the war, but authority does not return fully. Then the empire begins to resist. In 1946, conflict started in Indochina. You try to reassert control over Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. Local forces organize under Ho Chi Minh. They fight for independence using both nationalist and communist support. The war continues for 8 years. It drains money, manpower, and political stability. In 1954, the conflict reached Dien Bien Phu. Your forces are surrounded and destroyed at the stronghold. You lose control of Indochina completely. You exit the region after the defeat. Then a second crisis hits. In 1954, conflict started in Algeria. This territory is not treated like a colony. You consider it part of France itself. Over 1 million French settlers live there. The war becomes violent on both sides. Torture, attacks, and reprisals spread across regions. The conflict moves beyond Algeria into French society. Public opinion divides across the country. Political stability begins to break under pressure. Military officers attempt a coup against the government. The Fourth Republic collapses under internal strain. Charles de Gaulle returns to power during the crisis. He restructures the political system to regain control. 1962, Algeria became independent. After Algeria, other colonies moved quickly toward independence. African territories gained independence in the 1960s. You lose direct control over the empire within a short period. You try to maintain influence through economic and political ties. The system continues in a different form, but control is gone. You watched another empire break. This time, the cost was not just economic or military. It pushed the political system itself to the breaking point. And the next empire doesn't collapse in years or decades. It takes centuries to fall apart piece by piece. What happens when decline becomes permanent and no reform can stop it? You are in the 1500s under Suleiman the Magnificent. The Ottoman Empire controls land across 3 continents. It stretches from Algeria to Iraq and from Hungary to Yemen. You control the primary trade routes between Europe and Asia. Istanbul stands as one of the most important cities in the world. Your military sets the standard for others to follow. The Janissaries operate as elite, highly trained soldiers. Your artillery leads the world in effectiveness and scale. You believe this advantage will continue indefinitely. It does not. Over time, your military stops adapting to new changes. You rely on systems that worked in earlier centuries. Meanwhile, European armies continually improved their tactics and technology. By the 1700s, they had defeated your forces in open conflict. Then your economic position begins to weaken. New sea routes connect Europe directly to Asia around Africa. Trade no longer depends on your land routes. You lose the advantage that once made you wealthy. European industries produce cheaper and better goods. Your markets begin to depend on foreign products instead. You shift from controlling trade to relying on it. Within the empire, control gradually weakens. Local governors gain more power and act independently. With its central authority becomes less effective across distant regions. Different groups, such as the Greeks, Armenians, and Arabs, demand autonomy or full independence. You keep losing wars externally. You lose territory in the Balkans to Austria and Russia. You lose control over Egypt and parts of North Africa. Each defeat reduces your strength further. Your enemies grow stronger with every loss you take. The decline continues across centuries without stopping. Then World War I delivers the final blow. You join Germany and Austria-Hungary in the conflict. You lose the war against the Allied powers. Your empire is divided through external agreements. Britain and France take control of Arab territories. Even Anatolia faces division among foreign powers. Then resistance forms inside what remains. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk led a nationalist movement. He fights a war of independence against the occupying forces. The movement succeeds in securing core territory. In 1923, the Republic of Turkey is established. The Ottoman Empire no longer exists. You just watched an empire decline over the course of more than 300 years. It did not collapse suddenly or recover at any stage. It kept weakening until nothing remained. Now you have seen every version of collapse. So what is the pattern that connects all of them? You step back and look at everything you just lived through. Different empires rise in different centuries under different systems. They all arrive at the same ending. The sequence never changes. Power expands until control starts slipping at the edges. Holding territory begins costing more than it returns. Then the pace of change slows at the top. Now look at the present with the same lens. The United States runs around 750 military bases across more than 80 countries. Its defense spending crosses $800 billion every year. Its national debt has crossed $34 trillion with rising interest costs. The dollar still dominates global trade as the reserve currency. At the same time, several countries are moving trade outside that system. China funds infrastructure across more than 140 countries through the Belt and Road Initiative. It leads global manufacturing output and rapidly expands military capability. Supply chains have shifted following recent global disruptions and geopolitical tensions. Semiconductor production stays concentrated in a few critical regions. Energy routes face pressure across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. Internal divisions grow stronger inside major powers. Alliances tighten across competing economic and military blocs. The structure looks different today, but the pressure points remain exactly the same. You've seen this before. Now, can you predict which superpower is next? Drop your answer in the comments. Subscribe if you haven't already. See you soon in the next video. History does not just repeat, it rhymes. So make sure you're listening for the next Money Echoes. Subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.